for entering onto the scene in the event of civil disturbance in the United States. These activities continued on into the 1980s, but the main agency that became involved on the civilian side was FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
The FEMA has created a great deal of paranoia, probably for very good reason. Their whole reason for existence is to take control and keep things going in time of a crisis, of earthquake or military crisis. In the instance of a military or political crisis, we don't know what extremes they're willing to go to. They've drawn up their martial law plans.
One of the things that grew out of the military contingency planning, such as cable splicer and garden plot, was the military assistance to the police forces in organizing these and training these SWAT squads. So these are, in fact, outright militarized police units, even though they are civilian. And the United States military, the Army particularly, had much to do with the establishment of these units through the 1960s and into the 70s. Now, I think all the way across the country there are SWAT units everywhere. And they started out in places like Chicago, I believe, and Los Angeles. But they were done with the help of the U.S. military.
Well, Rex 84 was a plan to collect dissidents around the country who might be involved in violent activity and throw them basically in detainment camps. Some people call them concentration camps.
They had, I believe, something like 17 military installations selected in the United States, where they would house up to, I believe, something like 150,000 or 250,000 people in the event that the streets turned to chaos if Reagan had invaded Central America in the early 1980s.
So despite what the director of the FBI may be saying currently, you can assume that they're still conducting covert operations.
They were going to round up every dissident and every person who took to the street, plus a lot of foreigners, at the same time, because they did not want to have the situation develop as it had against Johnson and Nixon over the Vietnam War. So in the early 80s, Reagan said all he had to, it was all prepared, the statement declaring martial law, suspending the Constitution, and then they could go out and take everybody over to these military reservations, the equivalent of concentration camps, and just hold them there until what he wanted to do was done.
The government is definitely shifting intelligence resources to the private sector. And one of the reasons for this is to escape public scrutiny under laws such as the Freedom of Information Act. Freedom of Information Act only applies to government agencies.
You have to imagine technology 20, 30 years in advance of what we're using today. All that is classified, and it's classified for a very good reason, because it's being put to criminal uses.
Bugging and interception of private communication, the disappearance of privacy, you might say. What's going on now is that there are large private corporate databases accumulated that accumulate information on individuals, track their activities, track their economic activities. These corporations would call themselves credit corporations or whatever, but they're essentially intelligence operations.
Okay, in Gridley, it's a project 2.5 months in the making, but now FEMA is putting the finishing touches on a community for 400 families that will house campfire survivors. FEMA crews have cleared the 72-acre site, running underground electric, sewer, water, and paved roads in a project costing in the tens of millions, building essentially an entire neighborhood in just 2.5 months. Survivors will live in these 1 to 4 bedroom housing units that look like this. 300 have already been placed. They'll come fully furnished and will look similar to this inside. FEMA's project manager says crews have exceeded expectations because they know just how important it is.
They're not walking between trailers. They're running from trailer to trailer to jump on the next project. You know, and that to me is pretty amazing to watch that kind of enthusiasm to help get the project finished on that pace.
Has the Trump administration set up concentration camps in Texas for migrants? The answer is yes, according to at least one expert, Andrea Pitzer, the author of One Long Night, A Global History of Concentration Camps. In one of her latest articles, Pitzer writes, quote, "While writing a book on camp history, I defined concentration camps as the mass detention of civilians without trial, usually on the basis of race, religion, national origin, citizenship, or political party, rather than anything a given individual has done. By this definition, the new child camp established in Tornillo, Texas, is a concentration camp."
Andrea Pitzer goes on to write, quote, "While tragic, this is hardly surprising, since the innovation of concentration camps rose in part out of the willingness to detain children." In another article, Andrea Pitzer looks at how Guantanamo started as a detention camp for immigrants. Andrea Pitzer joins us now from Washington, D.C. Andrea, welcome back to Democracy Now! So that is your latest headline for the Daily Beast. History lesson, Gitmo started as a detention camp for immigrants. Explain.
Basically, in the early 1990s, there were waves, tens of thousands of people in all, of refugees from Haiti and from Cuba that were heading toward Florida. And the U.S. Did not want to let them touch down, which would make their asylum claims much stronger. They didn't want to let them touch down on U.S. soil. So they interdicted them and held them at the naval base that had already been there for a very long time at that point. But they created a detention site to hold them. And so you had this argument that happened on a policy and court level over whether they could be forcibly repatriated. Would that be in line with international treaties? Meanwhile, they were detained for a very long time, and you ended up with rioting. You ended up with guards being investigated for abuses. You had the most problematic prisoners being detained at Camp X-Ray, a chain-link fence caged area. And eventually, after several court battles, it was decided that that there was not standing, that they, in fact, the courts couldn't rule that this was U.S. soil and that the claim wouldn't be heard. But then there was another court case where, because of HIV positive detainees who were being held in isolation without access to legal or medical care, a court agreed that they would hear that case. And as soon as the court agreed that they would hear that case, at that point it was the Clinton administration settled and made an agreement that would allow a certain number of people into the U.S. on certain categories. And that was in part to keep the courts from having jurisdiction at Guantanamo. And what's interesting is this from the
temporary shelters in Golden Hill. Good evening, I'm Vanessa Van Hefty. It is being set up at the City Operations Yard at 20th and B Streets. 10 News reporter Hannah Mullins is live with the concern amid a deadly hepatitis A outbreak. Hannah.
And Vanessa, the area is fenced off with barbed wire up here. It's also blocked off by another fence below. They've been setting up tents at the transitional camp area, and they'll start by bringing in women and kids tomorrow morning.
This is the land God forgot.
Stay there and sleep.
Large chunks of East Village festering with filth. And Hep A has made the streets more septic.
I have slept right here. I've slept right here. Detoxing from heroin, sick, just disgusted with myself.
That's been Charles Roverta's life for 17 years.
I call it the dread. When you wake up in the morning and it's like you're outside. You don't know if someone's gonna bust you over your head and try and rob you for what little you have.
The county counts more than 9,000 homeless people, and about 1,000 are vets. Michael Bear is haunted by sickening smells of Vietnam.
It smelled like burning skin, flesh, and it always lingered there.
He says this is worse, and everyone has their own demons that landed them here.
No one's prepared to lose their mom, you know what I mean? Especially when
Roverta lost his mom and dad just a few months apart. He caved to the clutches of addiction.
Especially when she's been there for you, no matter what, you know? So, I'm sorry.
After taking 2 bullets, he tried to turn his life around, but was turned away.
Because I am an ex-felon and covered with tattoos.
The conservatives out there, where the FEMA camps at? Obama's out of office. I just wanted to ask you guys, because I was reading about the detention centers today that Trump's going to set up. I thought that's what you guys were worried about with Obama. Where the FEMA camps at? Where are they at? How about Jade Helm 115 or whatever the hell that was? Where's that? How about the black helicopters? Where are they? Are they up there? I don't see any black helicopters. How about the Hobbit homes? Is that a Hobbit home? Where are they? Just a quick question for all you conservatives who said that Obama was going to put us in Hobbit homes and he was going to do the Jade Helm and he was going to do the New World Order and he was going to do the FEMA camps. When are you going to admit that you were wrong? Can I get that admission right now? When are you going to admit that you were listening to a lunatic and it was the ravings of a mad mind? So, I'm not, believe it or not, I'm not even trying to get at you, although I am a little bit, because where are the FEMA camps at? Where are the FEMA camps at? I don't see the FEMA camps. Obama's out of office. The main thing that I want you to do is just think about it for a second. Wait a minute. I really did believe in FEMA camps, and yet they don't exist.
One of the things in terms of hospital capacity that's going to be really important is a really good learning from China that we got from the World Health Organization team that went there, is if we have communities where we have enough capacity where we can put people who are positive with COVID-19 and have them be exclusively reserved for individuals who are positive for COVID-19. This reduces our need to try to protect patients from other patients because they're all positive already. We need to protect our healthcare workers and our service workers in those facilities. This gives us reduced burden on personal protective equipment, but it also can give us greater capacity as we put field medical shelters up, as we consolidate into single facilities, as we don't need individual rooms, negative airflow, isolation, etc. A vastly more efficient utilization of our healthcare system. This is all part of the planning work that we've done and are promulgating throughout our healthcare system. So that's our strategy. We're going to keep building that capacity, though.
Very good.
Quarantine in human history. Millions of people are in a state of lockdown in China. However, even outside mainland China, there are thousands of people worldwide who've been quarantined after being evacuated from Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak. Let's now take a look as to what life is like inside quarantine camps from Serbia to Australia to the United States.
The coronavirus outbreak has pushed thousands of people in quarantine across the globe. This is a camp in Siberia. Scores of Russians are being kept here. In the best-case scenario, they'll be allowed to leave in 2 weeks. Vladimir Markov is here after spending 3 months in Wuhan. The Russian government evacuated him.
Okay, we are finally in a hospital. Now what we have to do, we have to put our old clothes in one bag. This is top clothes, another clothes in another bag. And then call the reception, they will come and take all clothes for disinfection. Also we had to use alcohol and clean all personal belongings. That's it. Let's do it.
Russia shares a 4,300-kilometer long border with China. It was sealed after 2 cases of the coronavirus were confirmed, both Chinese nationals. Wang Yunbin was one of them. He did not know he was infected.
The hospital didn't tell me at first because they might have been worried that we would refuse to be quarantined in the hospital or refuse medical treatment. Or they were worried I might overreact to the news. They might have planned to tell my family first and then me.
30-year-old Van reveals how he feared for his life.
This is the first time in my 30-year life that I'm thinking about death, because death cases are being reported every day in China. Later I told myself it was just a cold, only a more severe and a new kind of cold, and no drugs had yet been found that will cure this cold. If we can overcome the